My name is Harper, and I'm 33 years old. I never imagined that changing my own locks would lead to a full-blown family war. My name is Harper, and I'm 33 years old. I've been a registered nurse for almost a decade, and after years of working double shifts and saving every extra dollar I could, I finally bought my own little house in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. It wasn't anything fancy, a two-bedroom craftsman with creaky floors, pale blue siding, and a porch that sagged slightly on one side, but it was mine. Mine to decorate, mine to protect, and, most importantly, mine to feel safe in. I married Liam 5 years ago. He's an engineer, patient, and soft-spoken, the type of man who always sees the best in people even when he shouldn't. I loved that about him. But sometimes that same gentle nature made him blind to things I couldn't ignore. Especially when it came to his sister, Fiona. Fiona was difficult. That's the kindest way I can put it. She was loud, impulsive, and seemed to thrive on chaos. From the very first family dinner I attended after marrying Liam, she made it clear I wasn't exactly welcome in her world. She'd toss out little comments. "Oh, so you're the one who stole my brother's attention." Or, "Liam never used to be so serious before you came along." At first, I tried to laugh it off. I thought maybe she was just adjusting to the idea that her brother was married. But Fiona didn't adjust. She invaded. It started small, showing up unannounced with coffee or snacks, always with an excuse about being in the neighborhood. Then it became more frequent. She'd come over during her lunch breaks, after work, sometimes even on weekends when Liam and I were trying to relax. I didn't mind a few visits here and there, but what frustrated me was how she treated our house like it was hers. She'd walk right in without knocking, calling out, "It's just me," as if that made it okay. Sometimes she'd leave the door wide open behind her, letting the cold air sweep through. Once, I came downstairs after a shower to find her sitting at our kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, completely unfazed by the fact that I was still in a towel. I told Liam I was uncomfortable. He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and said, "She doesn't mean any harm, Harper. You know how Fiona is." That sentence became his shield every time I brought it up. You know how Fiona is. But knowing how she is didn't make it easier to live with. It made me feel like I didn't have a right to complain about being disrespected in my own home. The last straw before everything started unraveling was the day I came home from a night shift to find Fiona in my kitchen wearing one of my sweaters. She was making herself breakfast, humming along to music on her phone like she lived there. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and said, "Liam told me where you keep the spare key. I hope you don't mind, I didn't want to bother you." Didn't want to bother me? She was using my blender and eating the last of my eggs. I bit my tongue because Liam wasn't home, and I didn't want to make a scene. But inside, something in me snapped. That evening, when I finally confronted Liam, he looked tired and said, "She's my sister, Harper. She just needs a place to feel welcome." I stared at him, shocked. "A place to feel welcome? This is our home, Liam, not her crash pad. I'm not asking for much, just for her to respect our space." He didn't argue back, but I could tell he didn't truly understand. Days passed, and Fiona kept showing up. She'd borrow small things, utensils, towels, even once took a bottle of wine from our pantry without asking. She rearranged my kitchen drawers to make them more practical. When I told her to stop, she rolled her eyes and said, "Relax, Harper. You're so uptight." It should have. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I was uptight. I had spent years trying to create stability, control, and peace in my life. I worked hard to afford my home, to build a sanctuary where I could unwind after long hospital shifts, and Fiona's chaos was threatening all of it. Still, I tried to keep the peace for Liam's sake. I told myself she'd get bored eventually and move on, but she didn't. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed the front door was unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it earlier. Then I saw the faint marks around the doorknob like someone had turned it recently. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I went outside and saw footprints on the front step, small, faint, but familiar. Fiona's size. The next morning I asked Liam if his sister had been by. He hesitated before admitting she'd stopped in to drop something off for him while I was at work. My blood boiled. She had come into the house while I wasn't home. That was the moment I decided something had to change. I didn't care how fragile Fiona was or how forgiving Liam wanted to be. I had worked too hard for this home, for this peace, to let anyone violate it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the keys in my hand, the ones that opened every door in the house. Then I imagined Fiona using her copy, walking in whenever she pleased, rummaging through my cabinets, making herself at home in a place that was supposed to be mine. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store, bought a new lock set, and replaced every single one. It took me less than an hour. But when I turned that final screw and tested the key, a wave of calm washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't tell Liam right away. I knew he'd be upset, maybe even angry. But I also knew something else. This wasn't about Fiona anymore. This was about me reclaiming the space that had slowly been stolen from under my feet. But what I didn't know then was that changing those locks would open a door to something far darker than I ever expected. It all started with something small, something that should have been harmless. When Liam and I first moved into the house, everything felt new and full of promise. We were still unpacking boxes, still learning which light switches did what, still figuring out how to make the space ours. It was during that first week that Fiona dropped by with a housewarming gift, a cheap set of coasters, and a candle that smelled like artificial strawberries. She handed it to me with that same half-smile she always wore, the kind that looked polite until you realized it wasn't. Then she said something that, at the time, felt innocent. "You should probably give me a spare key, in case of emergencies. What if you two go out of town and I need to water the plants or grab your mail?" Liam looked at me, then back at her, and said, "That's a good idea. We trust you." I hesitated but forced a smile. "Sure. Why not?" And just like that, she had access to our home. At first, it really was harmless. She'd occasionally stop by to leave something for Liam, a package, a file, or his favorite snacks. Once, she even cleaned the front porch when it got covered in leaves. I appreciated that gesture, though I still didn't love the idea of her letting herself in. But as the months went by, the visits became more frequent, and her helpfulness started to feel invasive. She'd leave little signs of her presence, a mug in the sink, a jacket draped over the couch, or an empty soda can on the counter. One afternoon, I came home early from work and nearly screamed when I found her sitting on the floor of our living room, painting her nails, the smell of acetone heavy in the air. She looked up at me like it was the most normal thing in the world and said, "Oh hey, I was just waiting for Liam. I used the key. Hope that's okay." It wasn't okay. Not even a little. That evening, I told Liam that Fiona needed to give the key back. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "Harper, she just gets lonely. She likes to feel included. Let's not make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was our home. From that day forward, I started locking my bedroom door when I was home alone. I didn't want to risk walking out of the shower to find Fiona standing in the hallway again. And that actually happened once. On a Saturday morning, I came out wrapped in a towel only to see her at the dining table eating cereal. She smiled and said, "Didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to use your Wi-Fi. Mine's acting up again." Liam wasn't home to see it, and when I told him later, he gave me that same tired look. "She didn't mean any harm," he said again. That phrase was starting to feel like poison. Then came the day she took it too far. I'd just finished a long shift at the hospital, 12 hours on my feet, dealing with back-to-back emergencies. All I wanted was a hot shower and an early night. But when I walked into the house, I noticed something off immediately. There was a faint hum of music coming from the kitchen. My stomach dropped. I followed the sound and found Fiona standing at the counter, blending a smoothie like she belonged there. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "Hey Harp, I made extra if you want some," she said, holding up a glass. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Oh, Liam said you'd be working late. I wanted to surprise him with dinner. I couldn't find your blender though, so I borrowed it." "That's my blender," I snapped before I could stop myself. She blinked, then shrugged. Right. Sorry. I didn't think it'd matter. That was the thing, she never thought it mattered. My privacy. My space. My boundaries. To her, it was all just a game. When Liam got home, I told him everything. I expected him to finally understand how serious this was. But instead, he looked caught between frustration and guilt. She's just trying to help, he said softly. She doesn't realize she's overstepping. Then make her realize, I said, because I'm done pretending this is okay. He promised he'd talk to her, and he did. Or at least he said he did. But if anything, her behavior got worse after that. She'd come by when she knew I was home, probably just to make me uncomfortable. Once, she walked in and said, "You should really keep this place tidier, Harper. It's a bit lived in." I wanted to scream. I started noticing little things going missing. A hairbrush, a sweater, one of my candles. When I mentioned it, Liam said I was imagining things, but I knew I wasn't. One evening, after another uninvited visit, I caught her rearranging the kitchen drawers. When I asked what she was doing, she laughed and said, "I'm just organizing for you. You've got your spoons and forks all mixed up. Drives me crazy." It was such a casual violation that I stood there, speechless. She didn't see what she was doing as wrong. That night, I sat on the couch after she left and stared at the door. That door she walked through so freely, like it was a revolving entryway to her second home. I imagined her key sliding into the lock, her hand twisting the knob, her feet padding across my floor without my permission. And that's when I realized something I should have known all along. Fiona wasn't just crossing boundaries. She was erasing them. That was the day I realized Fiona wasn't just crossing boundaries, she was taking over my home. I didn't tell Liam I was going to do it. By that point, I'd spent months feeling like a guest in my own home. Every time I heard footsteps on the porch or the creak of the front door, I'd tense up, half expecting Fiona to walk in uninvited with that smug smile. I'd started avoiding weekends at home, altogether, volunteering for extra shifts just so I wouldn't have to deal with her surprise visits. It wasn't healthy, and I knew it. But Liam didn't see the damage it was doing, how I was slowly starting to resent both of them. The breaking point came one Thursday evening. I got home from a double shift, exhausted and ready to collapse. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was off. There was a faint smell of burnt toast, and that same strawberry-scented candle Fiona had given me months ago burning on the counter. My stomach dropped. I looked around and saw dishes in the sink, crumbs on the counter, and a half-empty cup of coffee next to my favorite mug. Fiona's lipstick shade bright coral was smeared across the rim. I didn't need to guess who had been there. I called Liam, my hands shaking. "Did Fiona come by today?" He hesitated before answering. "Yeah, she said she needed to borrow the Wi-Fi again. I thought you wouldn't mind." "Wouldn't mind?" My voice broke. "Liam, she was in our house while I was at work. Do you understand how insane that is?" He sighed heavily, the sound of his guilt spilling through the phone. "Harper, she's my sister. She doesn't have bad intentions, she just doesn't think things through." That was the moment I stopped arguing. Because it was clear he wasn't going to fix it. The next morning I made up my mind. I wasn't going to live like that anymore. On my way home from work, I stopped by the hardware store. The clerk, an older man with kind eyes, asked what kind of locks I needed. I told him, something strong, something no one else has the key to. He smiled and handed me a heavy brass lock set. "No one's getting past this unless you let them," he said. When I got home, the house was quiet, peaceful, almost mocking in its stillness. I set down my bag, grabbed my toolbox, and got to work. The click of the screwdriver against the metal echoed through the example hall. It was a small sound, but it felt like a declaration. With every turn of the screw, I could feel my heartbeat slow. Every lock I replaced was a layer of anxiety peeling away. By the time I finished, the sun was dipping behind the trees, and the house was bathed in golden light. I held the new keys in my palm and smiled. For the first time in what felt like forever, this space truly belonged to me again. I made dinner just something simple, pasta and a glass of wine, and when Liam came home, he noticed immediately. "Did you do something to the locks?" he asked, trying the key that no longer worked. I didn't look up from my plate. "Yes, I changed them." He blinked, caught off guard. "Without telling me?" "Yes," I said. "Because every time I tell you something about Fiona, you dismiss it. So I did this one thing for myself." He looked hurt. But I didn't feel guilty. "Not this time." "You could have at least waited for me," he said quietly. "Waited for what? For her to come in again while I'm asleep? For her to take something else that isn't hers?" I snapped. He didn't argue. Instead, he just sat down across from me, rubbing his temples. I could tell he wanted to defend her, but he also knew I was right. That night, we barely spoke. We went to bed in silence, a cold tension hanging between us. But I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, everything seemed almost normal. I made coffee, watered the plants, and listened to the soft hum of the fridge. The air felt lighter, freer. I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from Fiona, a few texts. "Fiona, Harper, did you change the locks?" "Fiona, my key doesn't work anymore." "Fiona, why would you do that?" "This is so petty." "Fiona, Liam's going to be furious when he finds out." I stared at the screen, feeling my pulse rise, then turned it off and set it aside. I wasn't engaging. Not this time. By noon, the calls turned into voicemails. Her voice was getting shriller with each message, angry, hurt, indignant. I deleted them all. When Liam came home that evening, his face was pale. "She called me," he said quietly. "She's furious, Harper. You really hurt her." "I hurt her?" I laughed bitterly. "She's been breaking into my life for months, and I'm the one who hurt her?" He didn't answer. He just sighed, the way he always did when he didn't want to pick a side. That night, I sat in the living room, watching the clock tick. A strange stillness filled the air, the kind that comes right before a storm. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, that she'd get the message and finally stay away. But deep down, I knew Fiona. I knew she wouldn't let this go. Sure enough, around 8 p.m., I heard it. 3 loud, angry knocks on the door. Then again. Harder this time. "Harper! Open this door right now." My heart started pounding. I didn't move. The knocking turned into pounding, and then into fists slamming against the wood. "Harper, I know you're in there. You can't just shut me out like this. I'm family." Her voice rose, echoing through the quiet street. Neighbors' lights flicked on one by one. I stood frozen, staring at the door, my pulse roaring in my ears. Liam came down the stairs, panic flashing across his face. "Don't open it," I whispered. He hesitated, torn between me and the chaos on the other side. Fiona's voice cracked as she screamed my name, full of rage and betrayal. The sound shook me to my core. But by evening, Fiona was at my doorstep, pounding the door like she owned the place. Her screams echoed through the whole street. It started as angry pounding, 3 sharp thuds that rattled the wood beneath my feet. But then came the screaming, the kind that pierced through the quiet of the neighborhood and sent shivers crawling down my spine. Fiona's voice had always been loud, but this was different. It was shrill, unhinged, almost feral. "Open this door right now, Harper," she screeched. "You don't get to do this to me." I stood completely still, clutching my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter in my hands. My heart was racing, each beat slamming against my chest. The rational part of me knew she couldn't get inside anymore. The locks were new. I had taken back control. But that didn't make it any easier to hear her voice just feet away, dripping with fury and entitlement. Liam rushed to the door, his face pale. "Fiona, calm down," he called through the wood. "This isn't the way to handle things." "Not the way to handle things?" she shouted back, her words cracking mid-sentence. "You let your wife lock me out like some stranger? Are you kidding me, Liam?" I didn't say a word. My throat felt tight, my palms slick with sweat. "Fiona, please," he said again, softer this time. "You can't just come here screaming, the neighbors." "Oh, let them hear," she interrupted. Let everyone see what kind of person she really is. Controlling, manipulative, she's turning you against your own family. My stomach twisted. I could almost picture her face, red with rage, her eyes wild. This wasn't the first outburst she'd had, but it was the first one that made me genuinely afraid. I took a step back from the door, my body trembling. "Don't open it," I whispered. Liam turned to me, torn. "She's my sister, Harper, and I'm your wife," I said, my voice shaking. "Thanks for watching. And she's crossing every boundary possible. If you open that door, she'll never stop." He hesitated, glancing between me and the sound of Fiona still shouting outside. "You don't understand how she gets," he said. "Oh, I do," I snapped quietly. "I understand exactly how she gets." Fiona switched tactics then. Her voice softened, though it still carried that sharp, manipulative edge. "Liam, I just want to talk to you. I can't believe she'd go behind your back like this. You're really okay with her locking me out?" I could hear the tears now, the dramatics I'd seen so many times before. It was all performance, her favorite tool when she wanted control. Liam rubbed the back of his neck, muttering under his breath. "She's making a scene," he said. I moved closer to the window and peeked through the blinds. Fiona was standing on the porch in her oversized coat, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Her hands were clenched into fists, her hair sticking to her face. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan, our elderly neighbor, had stepped outside, peering over her hedges in alarm. "Harper!" Fiona shouted again. "You're destroying this family. You think you can just shut me out, but you can't. You'll regret this." The words hit me like a slap. Liam put his hand on the doorknob, and I immediately reached out to stop him. "Don't," I said firmly. "She wants a reaction. That's all she ever wants." He looked defeated, caught in the middle of a storm he didn't know how to navigate. The pounding stopped for a few seconds. Then came the crying, loud, theatrical sobs that filled the silence between us. "You're both so cruel," she wailed. "You don't even care what this is doing to me." Something about the way she said me sent chills down my spine. Everything was always about her feelings, her perspective, her suffering. Never mind that she'd been walking into our home, disrespecting my space, and tearing apart my peace for months. In Fiona's world, she was always the victim. Then came the part that truly broke something inside me. Fiona's voice turned cold, sharp again. "You think you're better than me, Harper? You think you can just erase me from Liam's life? You've been nothing but a problem since the day he married you." I felt the blood rush to my face. My grip on the mug finally loosened, and I set it down before I dropped. My voice trembled as I said, "She's never going to stop, Liam. Not until you make her." He didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at the door, listening to his sister's rage echo through the quiet night. Outside, Fiona's voice rose again, raw and furious. "You think this makes you safe, Harper? Changing the locks doesn't change what you are." The words made my stomach knot, but I couldn't move. Finally, after what felt like hours, the shouting stopped. I heard the crunch of gravel under her shoes as she stormed off, the sound fading down the driveway. The silence that followed was almost painful. Liam exhaled shakily. "She's gone," he said, like he didn't quite believe it himself. I sank onto the couch, my legs trembling. "She'll be back," I whispered. "People like her don't just walk away." He sat beside me, his hands clasped together, eyes distant. "I just don't know what to do anymore." "Then maybe it's time you start choosing," I said quietly. "Because this can't keep happening." He didn't answer, and the silence between us grew heavy. Later that night, as I was locking up the house again, I saw something tucked under the doormat, a folded piece of paper. I bent down and picked it up. In messy handwriting, it read, "You'll regret this." My breath hitched. I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash, but the words stayed in my mind long after the lights went out. And that's when Fiona screamed something that made my blood run cold. "You think you can erase me like you erased your own sister?" Those words tore through the night like a blade. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. But when I glanced at Liam, his stunned expression told me he'd heard it too. My throat went dry, my chest tightening so sharply I could hardly breathe. How could Fiona possibly know about that? My sister Tessa was the one part of my life I had never spoken about, not to friends, not to coworkers, not even to Liam. I'd buried that chapter deep, sealed under layers of guilt and silence. And now Fiona had unearthed it, screaming it out for the entire neighborhood to hear. I backed away from the door, shaking. Liam's voice was a low, confused whisper. "What does she mean, Harper?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter as memories I'd spent years suppressing started clawing their way back. Outside, Fiona continued her tirade, feeding off the shock she'd caused. "Oh, that's right, you didn't tell him, did you? Poor Liam doesn't even know he married someone who abandoned her own blood?" Tears burned behind my eyes. I couldn't take another second of it. "Liam, don't," I said sharply when he reached for the door handle. "She's trying to get to me. That's what she does." But it was too late. He cracked the door open just enough to shout, "Fiona, go home!" Fiona's laughter, cold, sharp, mocking, slipped through the crack like smoke. "Oh, you really don't know, do you, Liam? Ask your perfect wife what she did to her sister before she starts pretending she's some kind of victim." Liam slammed the door and locked it again, turning toward me. "Harper, what is she talking about?" I wanted to tell him, but the words wouldn't come. I hadn't thought about Tessa in years, hadn't even said her name out loud. The memories were too heavy, too ugly. "Please," I whispered, "just don't ask me that right now." He studied me, his eyes softening when he saw the tears slipping down my cheeks. "Okay," he said finally, his voice gentle. "We'll talk later." But I knew that later would come soon, and when it did, it would tear open old wounds I wasn't ready to face. Fiona finally left that night, though not quietly. She shouted a few last insults as she walked down the driveway, promising that I couldn't hide forever. When her car finally pulled away, the silence that followed felt deafening. I went to bed in a daze, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps outside. And underneath all that fear was something else: shame. The kind that never really fades, no matter how much time has passed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past I'd tried to forget. Tessa had been my younger sister by 4 years. We'd grown up inseparable, sharing everything: clothes, secrets, even dreams of moving out of our small hometown. But when our parents died suddenly in a car accident, everything between us shifted. I was 21. She was 17. And we both handled grief differently. I threw myself into work and college. She fell into the wrong crowd. At first, it was little things: skipping classes, borrowing money she never paid back. Then came the lies, the manipulation. The nights I stayed up wondering if she was even alive. I tried to help her. I begged her to get clean, to let me in. But every time I reached out, she pushed me away harder. The last time we spoke, she stole from me everything I had left from our parents. When I confronted her, she looked at me with those hollow, defiant eyes and said, "You don't own me, Harper. You never did." That was the day I walked away. And I never looked back. Now, years later, Fiona was throwing that story in my face, something she couldn't have possibly known on her own, which meant someone told her. But who? The next morning, I found Liam sitting at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched. "You want to tell me what that was about?" he asked quietly. I sat across from him, staring down at my trembling hands. "It's complicated. I've got time." So I told him. Not everything, just enough. I told him that Tessa and I hadn't spoken in years, that we'd fallen out after a series of bad choices. I told him how much I regretted it, how hard it was to move on. Liam reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to carry that alone," he said. "But I think Fiona's using it to hurt you. Someone must have told her." That thought festered in my mind all day. Fiona wasn't smart enough to dig up my past on her own. Someone had to have helped her. But who would she even talk to? I hadn't spoken to anyone from my hometown in nearly a decade. That night, I found myself scrolling through old social media accounts I hadn't touched in years, and that's when I saw a message request I'd missed weeks ago, from someone with a familiar last name. Hi Harper, I know this is random, but your sister mentioned you recently. She said she ran into a friend of your husband's family. Small world, right? I stared at the message, my pulse thundering in my ears. That was how Fiona knew. She'd found someone from my past. Fiona didn't stumble upon my secret. She dug for it. And now, she was using it as a weapon. That night, I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone lighting my face as I reread that message over and over. I knew Fiona could be cruel, but I hadn't realized she was calculating, deliberate, capable of going that far just to hurt me. I knew then that Fiona wasn't just cruel, she was calculating. Liam insisted on a family meeting the next day. When he said the words, my stomach sank. The idea of sitting in a room with Fiona after everything that had happened made me nauseous. But Liam looked so earnest, so desperate to fix things, that I couldn't bring myself to say no. He thought a calm, civilized conversation would make everything right again. He still didn't understand that Fiona didn't do calm or civilized. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at Beatrice's house, Liam and Fiona's mother. The woman intimidated me even before all this. She had that polished, commanding presence of someone who'd spent her whole life getting her way. When I first met her, she smiled warmly, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. I knew she was measuring me, trying to figure out if I was worthy of her son. Now, after the lock change and the screaming incident, I doubted she'd even try to hide her disapproval. We arrived right on time, but Fiona and Beatrice were already seated in the living room. Beatrice was perched perfectly upright on the edge of her armchair, a cup of tea in her hand. Fiona sat next to her, legs crossed, a smug expression painted across her face. Harper, Beatrice said, her tone smooth but clipped. Thank you for coming. I nodded stiffly. Of course. Liam gestured for me to sit beside him on the couch. I could feel his tension radiating. He was nervous too, though for different reasons. He wanted peace. I wanted boundaries. Beatrice cleared her throat. So, I hear there's been some tension between you two. Tension, Fiona scoffed, throwing her hands up dramatically. She changed the locks, mother, without telling anyone. She's trying to cut me out of my brother's life. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice even. I changed the locks because you were entering my house without permission, Fiona. Multiple times. Fiona let out a disbelieving laugh. Oh, come on, it's not like I was stealing anything. I was just visiting. You make it sound like I broke in. You did break in, I said sharply. Entering someone's home without consent is breaking in, no matter what excuse you give. Beatrice raised a hand. Let's not get emotional. That word emotional hit me like a slap. It was the kind of word people used to dismiss women who dared to stand their ground. Liam finally spoke up, his voice low but firm. Mom, Fiona, this isn't about sides. It's about respect. Harper's not wrong to want privacy. Fiona turned to him, eyes wide with mock betrayal. You're defending her? After she humiliated me? How did she humiliate you? I asked, my patience cracking. By wanting her own key to her own home? Beatrice set down her cup with a soft clink. Harper, dear, I understand you value your independence. But this family has always been close. Fiona's not a stranger, she's part of us. Maybe you could have handled this with a little more compassion. Compassion. Another word that burned. Compassion doesn't mean allowing someone to invade my home, I said quietly. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Beatrice pursed her lips, unimpressed. In this family, we look out for each other. Maybe you come from a different kind of upbringing, but… Mom, Liam interrupted, his voice tense. That's enough. The room fell silent for a moment. Fiona crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, smirking like she'd won something. I knew that look. It was the same one she wore every time she managed to twist a situation in her favor. I took a deep breath. Fiona, I've tried to be patient with you, but you've ignored every request, crossed every line, and turned this into something ugly. I can't live like that anymore. Fiona's smile faltered for just a second before she composed herself. You're being dramatic, Harper. You've always had control issues. Maybe you should work on that. I laughed bitterly. Control issues? You mean not wanting someone barging into my home whenever they please? Beatrice sighed as if I were the one exhausting her. Harper, darling, Fiona's had a difficult year. You wouldn't understand, she's been fragile since her father's passing and the whole will situation. My eyebrows furrowed. What will situation? Liam looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Beatrice gave him a pointed look before turning back to me. It's not important. No. I think I'd like to know, I said. Beatrice's expression hardened slightly, as if realizing she'd said too much. Fiona's father didn't leave her what she expected in his will. It's been hard for her to adjust. I glanced at Fiona, who looked away, her jaw tight. So she's angry at everyone who has what she doesn't, I said slowly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Fiona's head snapped toward me, her eyes flashing. Don't psychoanalyze me, Harper. You don't know anything about this family. Maybe not, I replied evenly, but I know manipulation when I see it. For the first time, Fiona's mask cracked. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Acting like you're better than me because you've got a mortgage and a marriage that's probably hanging by a thread. Liam stood up then, his voice raised. Enough. The sudden authority in his tone startled everyone, even me. He looked between his mother and sister, anger and exhaustion etched into every line of his face. This has gone too far. Harper's not the problem here. Fiona, you need to back off. Mom, stop enabling her. Beatrice's mouth opened in protest. But he cut her off. No. I've ignored this for too long. It ends today. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Fiona's face flushed red, her lip trembling with rage. She grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Beatrice stood, glaring at her son. That was unnecessary, she said coldly. You've just made things worse. Liam didn't respond. He just walked out the door after me. As we got into the car, I could see his hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have stood up for you sooner. I reached over and took his hand. I know. But at least now you see what I've been dealing with. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. She won't let this go easily. And he was right. Because I could already feel the storm gathering again, heavier and darker than before. That's when Beatrice said something that changed everything. You wouldn't understand, Harper. Fiona has always been fragile since her father's will. Those words echoed in my head for the rest of the drive home. Beatrice had said them almost offhandedly, but the way she'd looked at me when she did half pity, half superiority, told me there was more to that story than she wanted to admit. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What did the will have to do with any of this? Why had Liam never mentioned it? When we got home, I turned to him before he could even take off his jacket. What did your mother mean about the will? He sighed and leaned against the wall, clearly dreading the question. It's complicated. So make it simple. He rubbed his temples. When Dad passed away, he left most of his estate to me. Fiona got a smaller portion, just enough to help her pay off her debts. She didn't take it well. I frowned. Didn't take it well? What does that mean? She felt betrayed, Liam said softly. She thought Dad favored me. The truth is, Dad didn't trust her with money. She'd been in trouble a few times, loans, bad credit, impulsive spending. He wanted her to learn responsibility, but she took it as rejection. Suddenly, everything clicked. The way Fiona talked about fairness, the resentment in her voice whenever she mentioned family, the uninvited visits, the intrusion, the obsession with being part of our home. It wasn't just about boundaries. It was envy. She resents you for having stability, I said slowly. And she resents me for being part of it. Liam nodded, his shoulders slumping. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it mattered. I thought she'd move on eventually. I let out a hollow laugh. You thought wrong. For the next few days, I couldn't stop turning it over in my mind. Fiona's anger wasn't random, it had roots. Deep, festering roots that had been growing since long before I came along. But understanding her didn't make her actions forgivable. If anything, it made them more dangerous. 2 nights later, Beatrice called. "Harper," she began, her voice clipped and formal. "I hope you're satisfied. Fiona hasn't spoken to me since that little scene you two caused." "Scene?" I repeated, trying to keep my tone calm. "You mean the conversation where she admitted to violating our privacy repeatedly?" Beatrice sighed dramatically. "You're very defensive, dear. I'm only saying that Fiona has been through enough. Losing her father's support, her inheritance, and now her brother's trust, it's a lot for one person." I bit back a sharp response. "With all due respect, Beatrice, Fiona's pain doesn't justify her behavior. She's family," she said firmly. "You wouldn't understand." There it was again, that same phrase. You wouldn't understand. It made me want to scream. After the call, I sat on the porch staring into the dark yard, my mind racing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Fiona's resentment had only grown because no one had ever held her accountable. Her mother made excuses. Liam avoided conflict. Everyone coddled her, afraid to face her wrath, and I was done being the next person on that list. The next day, Fiona texted Liam. Her tone was sweet, almost syrupy. "Can we meet for coffee? I just want to talk. No drama, I promise." He showed me the message, unsure what to do. I could tell part of him wanted to believe she was sincere. I'd seen that look before, the hopeful one he wore every time Fiona claimed she was trying to change. "Go," I told him. "But don't go alone. Meet her somewhere public, and don't let her twist things." He nodded reluctantly. When he came home later, I could tell by his face that the meeting hadn't gone well. "She's not sorry," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "She cried, said I'd betrayed her, said you turned me against her. She wants me to convince you to apologize." I stared at him. "Apologize? For protecting our home?" He gave a humorless laugh. I told her no. She didn't take it well. Of course she didn't. That night, Liam finally admitted something he'd been keeping from me. "She's been calling me at work, Harper. Almost every day. If I don't answer, she leaves voicemails, long ones. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to stress you out." I felt my stomach twist. "What kind of voicemails?" "The usual guilt trips. 'You're all I have left, Liam. Don't abandon me like Dad did.' Stuff like that." I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. "This isn't just family tension anymore. This is obsession." He nodded grimly. "I know. I'm starting to see it too." I looked at him, then really looked at him. The exhaustion etched into his face, the guilt, the helplessness. Fiona wasn't just destroying my peace. She was eating away at his too. In that moment, I made a silent promise. I wouldn't let her win. Not again. The next few days were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no unannounced visits. I should have felt relieved, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the pause before something worse. And I was right. 3 nights later, I woke up to a noise downstairs. A soft clatter, then another. I nudged Liam awake, my heart hammering. "Did you hear that?" He blinked, disoriented. "Probably just the cat." We didn't have a cat. We crept down the stairs together, the house cloaked in darkness. The kitchen light flickered faintly, the bulb we always forgot to replace. I could see the shadow of movement behind the curtain. Liam whispered, "Stay here." I froze, gripping the railing as he reached for the door. The knob rattled. And then a loud crash. But Fiona wasn't done. She was about to cross the ultimate line. It happened 2 nights later. I had convinced myself that Fiona's silence meant she had finally given up. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she'd realized how far she'd gone. But deep down, I knew better. People like Fiona don't retreat, they wait. They bide their time until they can strike again. That night, the air was heavy with rain. I was dozing on the couch, a blanket over my legs, when I heard it, a sharp, splintering crack that didn't belong to any storm. My eyes flew open. For a moment, I thought it was a tree branch hitting the window. But then I heard it again. The unmistakable sound of glass shattering. "Liam," I whispered, shaking him awake. "Someone's downstairs." He sat up groggily, blinking in confusion. "What?" Before I could answer, there was another sound, the squeak of shoes on tile. My blood ran cold. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept near the bed, motioning for me to stay behind him as we crept down the stairs. My hands were trembling, my heart thudding so hard I could barely hear anything else. The kitchen light was off, but a thin beam of moonlight leaked through the broken window. The air was cold, carrying the smell of wet earth and rain. I saw movement near the counter, a shadow bending over something. "Who's there?" Liam called out, his voice steady but low. There was a pause. Then, a familiar voice answered. "Don't freak out, it's just me." "Fiona," my heart stopped. She turned toward us slowly, her face pale and her eyes wild. Rainwater dripped from her hair, and her hands shook slightly as she clutched one of our kitchen towels. "Fiona?" Liam said, disbelief and anger mixing in his tone. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I just needed to grab a few of my things," she said quickly. "Stuff I left behind." "Your things?" I snapped, stepping forward despite Liam's warning glance. "You broke our window for that?" Her eyes darted between us. "I didn't mean to scare you. The door was locked, and you wouldn't answer my calls. I just needed to come in for a second." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You broke into our home, Fiona." "I didn't break in," she said defensively, her voice trembling. "I just couldn't find my key." That sentence pushed me over the edge. "There is no key anymore," I shouted. "You lost that privilege when you started treating my home like your playground." Liam raised the bat slightly, not to threaten her but to keep her distance. "You need to leave, Fiona, right now." Her expression crumpled, and suddenly, she was crying loud, hysterical sobs that echoed through the dark kitchen. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to talk to you, Liam. You've been avoiding me. You used to come by. You used to call. Now she's turned you against me." She pointed at me, her face twisting into something ugly. "This is all her fault." Liam's patience finally snapped. "Stop it," he shouted. "This has nothing to do with Harper. You crossed the line, Fiona. You've gone too far." For a brief moment, the only sound was the rain pounding against the windows. Fiona's sobs quieted into ragged breathing. Then she whispered, almost childlike, "You're really choosing her over me." Liam didn't respond. That silence was her answer. Fiona's face hardened. "Fine," she spat. "You'll regret this." She turned to leave, but before she could reach the door, Liam blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly. "We're calling the police." Her eyes widened in shock. "What? No, Liam, please, don't do this. But it was too late. I was already dialing." My voice shook as I gave our address, my words stumbling over each other. Fiona stood frozen, tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. When the flashing lights appeared outside, she broke down completely. "Liam, please, don't let them take me. I didn't mean it." But this time, her tears didn't move him. The officers were calm but firm. They took her statement, and when she admitted to breaking the window, they had no choice but to arrest her for trespassing and property damage. Watching her being led away in handcuffs should have made me feel triumphant. But all I felt was a hollow, sinking ache. Beatrice arrived at the station within the hour. She glared at me like I'd personally destroyed her family. "Are you proud of yourself?" she hissed. "You've turned a harmless misunderstanding into a criminal record for my daughter." "Harmless?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "She broke into my house." "She's sick," Beatrice snapped. "She's been through so much, and you've done nothing but push her further over the edge." I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that she'd hear. The following days were a blur. Fiona was released on bail within 48 hours, thanks to Beatrice pulling every string she could. Liam barely spoke, caught between relief and guilt. I tried to return to normal, to go back to work, cook dinner, read before bed, but everything felt wrong. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see her face in the window again. One morning, I found a small envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single photograph me and Liam at our housewarming party, smiling. Across the bottom, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "You took everything from me." I dropped it instantly, my hands shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Liam called the police again, but there wasn't much they could do without proof of who sent it. Every sound after that made me jump. The doorbell. The phone. Even the hum of the refrigerator at night felt menacing. Beatrice refused to acknowledge the danger, insisting Fiona wasn't capable of anything serious. But I knew better now. Fiona's arrest hadn't taught her a lesson. It had humiliated her. And humiliation, for someone like her, was fuel. I could feel it in my gut this wasn't over. But Fiona's arrest was only the beginning of her revenge. I woke up to a storm of notifications. At first, I thought my phone was glitching. The screen lit up with messages, pings, and missed calls so fast it froze. When I finally unlocked it, my stomach dropped. Every notification was a comment, a tag, or a screenshot, all pointing to one thing. Fiona had gone public. She'd posted a long, rambling message on social media, paragraphs of half-truths, outright lies, and emotional manipulation. The post started with a photo of her face streaked with tears, followed by a caption that read, "Some people think they can destroy families and get away with it. I was betrayed by the two people I trusted most, my own brother and his cruel wife. They've humiliated me, called the police on me, and tried to make me look crazy. All I ever wanted was to feel loved." The comment section was already a battlefield. People, many of them strangers, were sending heart emojis and words of sympathy. "You don't deserve this, Fiona. Stay strong. Family can be so toxic sometimes." But there were also others. People who knew us, neighbors, acquaintances, co-workers. Some asking what really happened. Others defending her. A few even mentioning me by name. I felt sick. Liam walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, and froze when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" I turned my phone toward him. He read silently for a few seconds before exhaling sharply. "Oh. No. She didn't." "She did," I said, my voice trembling. "And she's tagging everyone." Sure enough, she had tagged Liam, me, and half her family. Within hours, her post had hundreds of likes and comments. And then came the messages people I barely knew reaching out to check in. Some pretending to be concerned, others not even hiding their judgment. Liam immediately called her, but she didn't answer. He texted her, "Take the post down or I'll get a lawyer involved." She replied with a single line, "Go ahead. Maybe I'll tell everyone about Harper's little sister next." That was when I realized she hadn't just wanted to hurt us, she wanted to ruin me. By the end of the day, the fallout had spread beyond family gossip. One of my coworkers pulled me aside at the hospital. "Hey, I saw something online about your sister-in-law. Everything okay?" I wanted to disappear. "It's complicated," I said quietly, forcing a smile I didn't feel. But complicated didn't even begin to cover it. Fiona had painted me as a cold, manipulative woman who had isolated Liam from his family. In her story, she was the victim, the lonely sister who just wanted to belong. The next day, things got worse. Liam called me during lunch, his voice shaking with anger. "She sent emails to my boss." I froze. "What?" "She told him I was emotionally abusive. Said you and I colluded to cut her off because I wanted to control the family assets." My heart dropped. "Liam, that could affect your job." "I know," he said grimly. He doesn't believe her, but still, this is beyond insane. We both knew Fiona wasn't just seeking sympathy anymore, she wanted vengeance, public humiliation. And she was good at it. That night, Liam and I sat at the dining table in silence, both scrolling through the flood of comments and shares. I'd blocked her, but screenshots kept finding their way to me anyway. Friends, relatives, even strangers tagging my name in her thread. And then came the private messages, the cruel ones. "Wow, how could you treat your husband's sister like that? Some people shouldn't get married if they can't handle family. You sound controlling. Each message felt like a small stab to the chest. Liam wrapped an arm around me, his voice low. "We'll fix this. I promise." But promises didn't erase what was already out there. 2 days later, things reached a breaking point. I was called into my supervisor's office at the hospital. She looked concerned, even apologetic. "Harper," she said gently, "I need to ask about something. We've received an anonymous email actually. Several. They accuse you of mistreating a family member with mental health issues. Normally, we'd ignore something like that, but since you're in patient care..." My body went cold. "Are you saying she's trying to get me fired?" The supervisor sighed. "I'm not saying that. I just need you to know this could become an HR matter if it continues. We'll handle it professionally, but I suggest you document everything." I nodded numbly, holding back tears until I was alone. When I got home that night, Liam was pacing the living room, phone in hand. "She's doubling down," he said, "posting new stuff, calling you unstable, saying you're dangerous when angry." That was it. I broke down. I sank onto the couch and buried my face in my hands, sobbing until my chest hurt. "She's winning," I whispered. "Everyone's believing her. I can't take this anymore." Liam knelt beside me, his voice soft but steady. "No. She's not winning. She's unraveling. People like Fiona always overplay their hand. It's only a matter of time before she exposes herself." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that the truth would come out. But at that moment, it didn't feel possible. Fiona's lies were spreading faster than I could keep up with them. And the world loves a victim. That night, as I scrolled through the latest wave of comments, one notification stood out. A private message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Tessa. My heart stopped. Her message was short, almost hesitant. "Harper, I think we need to talk. It's about Fiona." I stared at the screen, frozen, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then one message from an unknown sender changed everything. The name in my inbox made my heart stop. Tessa. I hadn't seen or heard from my sister in almost 9 years. Seeing her name pop up on my phone felt like a ghost reaching through time. My first instinct was to delete it. Every memory I had of Tessa carried pain, betrayal, disappointment, loss. But something in me hesitated. Maybe it was the curiosity, or maybe it was exhaustion. After everything Fiona had done, part of me wanted answers, any answers. The message was short. "Harper, I know this is unexpected, but I saw Fiona's posts online. I think I need to explain something. Can we talk?" My stomach twisted. Fiona had found her. Somehow. She'd found Tessa. I stared at the message for what felt like an hour before finally replying. "How do you know Fiona?" The response came almost immediately. "She contacted me on Facebook weeks ago. Said she was your sister-in-law and that you were going through a rough time. She said you missed me and wanted to make things right." I believed her. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the floor, and I just sat there, numb. Fiona had pretended to be me. When I picked the phone back up, another message was waiting. She asked me questions about our past, about Mom and Dad, about what happened between us. I told her things I probably shouldn't have. I thought she was trying to help us reconnect. I felt sick. My past, every painful detail I'd buried, was now in Fiona's hands. Then I saw her posts today. That's when I realized she used me. "I'm sorry, Harper. I really am. I didn't know what to say." My hands were shaking as I typed back. "What exactly did you tell her?" It took a few minutes for the reply to come. When it did, I had to read it twice to process it. Everything. About the accident, about Dad's will, about how you and I stopped talking, even the part where you said you couldn't trust me anymore. She said she just wanted to understand your side so she could help Liam see the truth. The truth? Fiona didn't want truth, she wanted ammunition. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat by the window, staring out into the dark street, waiting for the next blow to come. Liam sat beside me, rubbing his temples. "So she contacted your sister, pretending to be you?" I nodded, my voice breaking. She must have known just enough to make it sound real. Tessa probably didn't think twice. He exhaled, his jaw tightening. That's not just manipulative, Harper. That's calculated. I told you, I whispered. She's not just angry. She's dangerous. He put his arm around me. Then it's time we stop reacting and start fighting back. The next morning, I called Tessa. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, filled with the ghosts of a decade's worth of words we'd never said. Harper, she said finally, her voice soft, unsure. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I thought I was helping. I know, I said quietly. But Fiona used you to hurt me. I know that now. When she started asking about the inheritance and the fights we had, I thought it was strange. But she said you wanted to explain your side to Liam. I felt my throat tighten. She wanted to destroy me. And she knew exactly where to dig. Tessa sighed. I should have realized sooner. She's intense. I could feel it even through messages. When I stopped replying, she sent me this weird voice note screaming about how you ruined her life. I blocked her after that. My skin crawled. Do you still have it? I think so, she said. I can send it to you. That recording would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence I had. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about evidence. I was thinking about how Fiona had invaded the one corner of my past I had left untouched. Had reached into my oldest wounds and turned them into weapons. Tessa, I said softly. I'm sorry for how things ended between us. I should have handled it differently. There was a pause. Then a quiet sob. I missed you, she whispered. Even after everything. That broke me. I missed you too. We talked for nearly 2 hours about the past, about Fiona, about the way pain can twist people into things they don't recognize. By the time we hung up, something inside me had shifted. Fiona had tried to use Tessa to hurt me, but all she'd done was give me a reason to finally face what I'd been avoiding. After that call, I stopped hiding. I gathered everything: screenshots, texts, voicemails, Fiona's posts, even that voice note from Tessa, and compiled them into a folder. I documented every single thing Fiona had done since the day I changed the locks. Liam helped me put it all in order. If she wants to play this game publicly, he said, then we'll play by the rules, legal ones. We met with a lawyer the following week. When we laid everything out, the lawyer's expression shifted from sympathy to alarm. This is harassment, she said plainly. You have more than enough evidence for a restraining order and possibly defamation. Hearing those words gave me a strange sense of power. For months, I'd felt cornered, powerless. But now, finally, there was a path forward. Liam squeezed my hand. We'll protect you, he said. We'll protect us. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The fear was still there, but it was different now, contained, directed. That night, I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of tea, scrolling through old photos of me and Tessa. There we were, 2 girls smiling, arms around each other, completely unaware of how fragile peace could be. For the first time, I let myself cry, not from pain, but from release. Fiona had tried to dig into my past to break me. Instead, she'd helped me close a wound I didn't know I still carried. But as I watched the raindrops trail down the window, I knew it wasn't over yet. Fiona didn't lose gracefully. She'd gone quiet since the posts, but silence from her never meant peace. It meant plotting. And I made a plan to end her games once and for all. I wasn't the victim anymore, I was ready to fight back. I remember the exact moment the shift happened, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of printed screenshots and my laptop open, the glow on my face like a spotlight illuminating every lie Fiona had told. For months, I'd been reacting, locking doors, deleting messages, answering calls, trying to stem the tide she'd unleashed. Now I wanted to be proactive. I wanted to build an unshakable record so when she screamed victim, no one would believe the performance. First, I organized everything. I made folders labeled by date, texts, calls, social posts, voicemails, photos. I time-stamped every entry. Tessa sent the voice note she'd promised, the one where Fiona impersonated me. The one that made my skin crawl, and I put it in its own folder like evidence in an exhibit. I printed the police report from the break-in and taped that too. The pile grew until it looked less like scattered chaos and more like a case file. Liam watched me methodically compile it all, and for the first time in months, his face held something fierce instead of guilty. "We should take this to a lawyer," he said. I didn't hesitate. We made an appointment the same week. Our attorney read through the files with a silent attentiveness that made my chest unclench a little. "This isn't just family drama," she said. "It's harassment, it's trespass. You have a strong case for a restraining order, and we can pursue defamation for the posts that targeted your reputation at work." Hearing those legal words, defamation, restraining order, felt like a map out of a maze I'd been wandering for months. It was the structured route to safety I'd been craving. We filed for the temporary restraining order that afternoon. The process required patience forms, notarized statements, and a judge's ear, but each signature felt like reclaiming ground. The court issued the order pending a hearing, and the feeling of having an official barrier around my home was intoxicating. For the first time in a long while, I slept without jumping at every sound. But legal action only covers so much. Fiona had weaponized social media, and the digital world doesn't always respect court orders. So I did what I could: screenshots of every post, reports to platforms for harassment and impersonation, direct messages to HR to explain the situation before their inboxes filled further. I reached out to friends and neighbors I trusted and asked them not to engage with her posts. I called my supervisor at the hospital and walked her through the timeline so there would be no question about my professionalism. The support came in small, steady bursts: messages from colleagues that said, "We've got your back." A text from a neighbor that read, "If she comes near your house, call me." Those little anchors steadied me. Tessa became a quiet hero in the background. She agreed to testify, to share the messages Fiona had sent her, and to be candid about how she'd been manipulated. Hearing her voice at the courthouse, raw and honest, helped stitch a part of my life back together I hadn't realized was still torn. Our conversation afterward was simple. We forgave, but we also set new boundaries. "No more silence," she said. "If she tries anything else, I'll stand with you." That solidarity changed everything. The social platforms finally suspended several of Fiona's accounts after repeated reports of impersonation and harassment. Her posts were taken down, screenshots notwithstanding, and some of the most egregious messages were removed. It was a relief, but the digital echoes remained: screenshots shared by strangers, old comments that refused to vanish. The legal team advised patience. A full resolution would take time, but the temporary orders and the account suspensions were tangible wins. When the court date for the restraining order arrived, I sat with my lawyer, the folder of evidence heavy in my lap like armor. Fiona's attorney tried to frame her as misunderstood, as someone pushed to the brink. But the evidence spoke loudly: the voicemail where she threatened me, the photos sent in red ink, the recordings where she impersonated me to my sister, all of it painted a different picture. The judge granted the restraining order and added a clause for monitored contact: any attempt by Fiona to approach the house, the workplace, or contact me directly would result in immediate arrest. I cried in the parking lot afterward, relief and exhaustion mixing in my tears. For once, I felt legitimately protected. Even with the court's ruling, I didn't let my guard down. I changed my routines, installed a doorbell camera, and set up 2 emergency contacts with the police. I updated passwords, froze accounts that Fiona might use to spy on our lives, and asked neighbors to call if they saw anything suspicious. It felt overzealous at first, but then it felt necessary. Word spread in measured ways. Colleagues who hadn't known the backstory expressed support. Some family members finally began to see the pattern instead of the performance. Liam's relationship with his mother strained visibly. He started answering fewer of her calls and more often walked away when conversations turned to Fiona. The cracks in the family's narrative were widening, but this time I wasn't alone in watching them. As Fiona's legal options narrowed, her behavior shifted from brazen public harassment to something colder, stealthier. A few nights later, an envelope arrived on our porch. Inside, a single Polaroid of our house taken from across the street and, scrawled on the back, a single word: watching. My stomach dropped. I called the police and handed the photo to the detective assigned to our case. He took it seriously and increased patrols. The restraining order was doing its job on paper, but the presence of that photograph reminded me that protection could be imperfect. Liam tightened his grip on my hand that night and said firmly, "We'll keep doing this, together." I believed him. And there was a steadiness in those two words that anchored me. I had gone from hand-wringing to action, from flinching to filing. I was no longer paralyzed by fear. I was channeling it into something that could protect myself and the people I loved. But even as the paperwork stacked in our favor and the platforms removed her reach, I couldn't shake the feeling that Fiona was planning one last, desperate move. But Fiona had one final surprise waiting. It was raining when I heard the knock. Not the gentle kind of rain that taps softly against the windows, but a relentless downpour, the kind that sounds like a warning. Liam and I were sitting in the living room, half watching some forgettable TV show, when the knock came 3 sharp raps that made my stomach twist instantly. It wasn't the kind of knock that waited for permission. It was insistent, familiar, and cold. Liam muted the TV. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew who it was. Another knock, louder this time. "Stay here," Liam whispered, standing up. But I followed him anyway, my heart hammering in my chest. The doorbell camera lit up with movement, and when Liam checked his phone, his face went pale. "It's her," he said quietly. "Fiona." She was standing on the porch, drenched from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and she was shaking whether from cold or something darker. I couldn't tell. The streetlight cast her in a pale glow, and for a split second, she looked almost fragile, almost human. I should have been afraid. But what I felt was something closer to disbelief. After everything, the arrest, the court order, the humiliation, she'd come back. Liam cracked the door open just a few inches, keeping the chain locked. "Fiona, what are you doing here?" Her voice came out in a trembling whisper. "Please, Liam, I need to come inside." "You're violating a court order," he said firmly. "You can't be here." She ignored him, her eyes darting past his shoulder until they landed on me. "Harper," she said softly, almost pleading. "I just need a place to stay for the night, that's all, please." I shook my head. "You need to leave, Fiona. You can't be here." She took a step closer to the door, the rain soaking her coat until it clung to her like a second skin. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice breaking. "Mom won't talk to me anymore. Everyone's abandoned me. You've won, okay? You've taken everything. Just let me stay here just tonight." Something about the way she said it made me pause. Her tone was hollow, desperate. I saw the faint tremor in her hands, the way her lips quivered as she spoke. For one awful moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the photo on our porch. The posts, the lies, the break-in. Liam's voice was steady but cold. "Fiona, I'll call the police if you don't leave." She let out a soft, broken laugh. "Go ahead. Add another report to your perfect little file. That's all you two are good at, pretending you're the victims." Her words made me shiver. There was venom in her tone now, the mask of vulnerability cracking. "Fiona," I said quietly, "please go home." Her eyes snapped back to mine, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Something unhinged flickering behind the tears. "You ruined me," she whispered. "You think I don't see it? You took my brother. You turned him against me. You made me the villain in my own family." "You did that yourself," Liam said. "You need help, Fiona. Real help." She banged her hand against the door, making me flinch. "Don't talk to me like I'm crazy," she screamed. "I just need to fix this." Liam grabbed his phone and started dialing. "I'm calling the police." That's when her voice dropped to a whisper again. "You'd really have me arrested again? After everything we've been through?" Her words were soaked in disbelief, as if we were the ones betraying her. Liam didn't answer. He spoke quickly into the phone, giving our address and explaining the situation. Fiona stood there the entire time, staring at him, her expression a mix of rage and heartbreak. When he hung up, She took a shaky step backward. "You'll regret this," she said softly. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Fiona turned, wrapping her arms around herself as the rain came down harder. She stood there, motionless, until the police car pulled up in front of the house. Two officers approached her, speaking gently, asking her to step away from the door. She didn't resist. She didn't scream this time. She just stared at me through me with eyes so full of hate they made my skin crawl. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to me, "we'll take it from here." I nodded, unable to speak. They led her to the car, her wet shoes leaving faint prints across the porch. Before she ducked into the back seat, she turned her head just slightly. And I'll never forget what I saw in her face, something dark, something final. When the car drove off, Liam closed the door gently and turned to me. His voice was low. "That's the last time. I'm done protecting her." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the police and the restraining order would finally keep her away. But as I stood there, staring out, the rain-streaked window, I couldn't shake the image of her eyes cold, burning, relentless. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made my body tense. I kept replaying the knock, her trembling voice, the way she said, "You'll regret this." The next morning, the house felt too quiet. The storm had passed, but its residue lingered mud on the steps, droplets clinging to the window panes, the faint outline of her shoes leading away from the porch. I cleaned in silence, wiping down the counters, trying to pretend that her presence hadn't seeped into the walls again, but no amount of scrubbing could erase the heaviness she left behind. Liam tried to reassure me. "She'll be taken to the hospital for evaluation," he said. "Maybe that's what she needed all along." I nodded, though deep down, I wasn't sure Fiona was the type to accept help. She didn't want healing, she wanted control. And the way she'd looked at me before getting into that car made one thing very clear. As the sirens approached, Fiona looked at me with hatred that chilled my soul. The court date came faster than I expected. By the time the summons arrived, Fiona had been in mandatory psychiatric evaluation for nearly 3 weeks. Those weeks were the first stretch of peace I'd had in months. No messages, no late-night knocks, no anonymous notes. Just silence, a heavy, unfamiliar quiet that almost felt fragile, like it could shatter at any second. Still, the day of the hearing carried a tension I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about legal paperwork anymore. It was about closure, or whatever version of closure you can get when the person who's tormented you is your own family. Liam and I arrived at the courthouse early. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that matched the weight of the moment. We didn't talk much on the drive. There wasn't anything left to say. Everything between us, the guilt, the anger, the fear, had already been laid bare. Inside, the air was thick with the faint smell of paper and disinfectant. Our lawyer greeted us, calm and composed. "It'll go quickly," she assured me. "We're presenting clear evidence of ongoing harassment and violation of the court order. The judge has already seen your documentation." I nodded, clutching the folder to my chest. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. When Fiona entered the courtroom, I almost didn't recognize her. The once polished sister-in-law who'd sneered at me across family dinners looked smaller, hollowed out. Her hair hung limp, her clothes hung loosely on her frame, and her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were dulled by something I couldn't quite name. She didn't look at me at first. She just sat down across the aisle, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge read through the summary, his voice steady and emotionless. Each word, trespassing, defamation, violation of restraining order, sounded surreal, like someone else's life being narrated aloud. But it was mine. Every incident, every sleepless night, every tear, it was all there in black and white. When it was her turn to speak, Fiona stood up slowly. Her voice cracked as she began. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be part of my brother's life again. I made mistakes, but I'm not a bad person." Her words might have sounded sincere to someone who didn't know her. But I did. And I saw the shift, the tiny glint in her eyes when she realized people were watching her. It was the same look she'd had outside my door that night. The same one she'd worn when she cried on social media. "I was misunderstood," she continued. "I lost control for a while, But I've been getting help. I'm trying to be better. My lawyer stood up next, her tone even. With all due respect, this isn't about misunderstandings. This is about repeated, deliberate choices. She gestured toward the stack of evidence messages, photos, recordings. The defendant had every opportunity to stop. She did not. The judge listened patiently. When Fiona tried to interrupt, he raised his hand to silence her. "You've had your chance to speak," he said firmly. The ruling came down swiftly. Fiona was found guilty of harassment, trespassing, and defamation. The restraining order was extended for 5 years. She was ordered to attend ongoing therapy and prohibited from contacting either of us in any form directly or indirectly. It was over. Or at least, that's what I told myself. As the judge dismissed the court, I turned to Liam. His eyes were glossy with emotion relief, sadness, guilt. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Harper. I should have protected you sooner." I squeezed his hand. "You did now. That's what matters." Fiona was escorted out by an officer. For a brief second, she turned her head toward us. There was no rage this time. No screaming. Just a hollow sort of emptiness that made my chest ache. That night, back at home, I stood by the window and watched the wind move through the trees. The house felt different, lighter somehow, but still bearing scars. There were scratches on the doorframe from where she'd pounded her fists, faint cracks in the glass from where the rock had hit weeks before. But those marks didn't bother me anymore. They were reminders, proof that I'd survived. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into something that almost resembled normal. I went back to work without flinching every time my phone buzzed. Liam started reconnecting with friends he'd lost touch with during the chaos. We even had dinner with my sister Tessa, one Saturday night. For the first time in nearly a decade, she and I laughed without that heavy shadow between us. But not everyone moved on. Beatrice stopped speaking to us entirely. In her eyes, we were the villains who'd destroyed her daughter. She sent Liam one final message before blocking him completely. "You'll regret turning your back on family." He read it once, deleted it, and said quietly, "Then so be it." A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. The return address was from the rehabilitation facility Fiona had been sent to. It was addressed to me. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was shaky. The words were uneven. "Harper, I'm supposed to write letters as part of my treatment. They say I should apologize. I don't know if I can. I don't think you'll ever understand why I did what I did, and maybe that's for the best. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to let go. I don't hate you anymore. I just don't know how to be anyone else." I read it once. Then again. And then I burned it in the kitchen sink. Watching the paper curl and blacken felt like closing a chapter I never wanted to read again. When Liam came home that evening, I handed him the last of the spare keys, the one he'd kept tucked away. Just in case. He looked at me. Puzzled. "I don't want any reminders," I said softly. "This house belongs to us now, not her." He smiled faintly and dropped the key into the trash. That night, as I locked the door before bed, the sound of the bolt sliding into place felt different. It didn't sound like fear anymore, it sounded like ownership. Like peace. And I realized I'd finally locked out more than just Fiona, I'd locked out the chaos. It's been 6 months since Fiona last tried to contact us. Sometimes, I still half expect to see her name flash on my phone screen or hear that sharp, demanding knock on the door. Trauma has a way of lingering in the corners, like dust that never fully sweeps away. But mostly, life has been quiet, peaceful, even. The first morning I truly realized she was gone. Really gone. I woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom curtains instead of the usual knot of anxiety twisting in my chest. The silence in the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt warm, still, safe. Liam and I rebuilt our routines slowly, piece by piece. Saturday mornings were for coffee on the porch. Sundays for grocery runs and long walks around the neighborhood. We planted a small garden in the backyard, lavender, rosemary, a few wildflowers. The scent of the earth and the hum of bees became our new soundtrack, a quiet rebellion against the chaos Fiona had once brought into our home. Sometimes, as I watered the plants, I'd catch myself looking at the front door, the same door she'd once pounded on so violently. Now, it stood clean and freshly painted, a pale sage green that Liam picked out himself. "A new start," he'd said, smiling softly. And it was. He's been different too. Stronger. The guilt that once clouded his eyes has faded, replaced by something steadier understanding. We don't talk about Fiona often anymore, but when we do, it's with a kind of quiet acceptance. She's still his sister. But the illusion of who she was has crumbled. He's finally stopped trying to fix her, and I've stopped trying to forgive her. Some wounds just need to scar. I kept my job at the hospital, despite Fiona's best efforts to destroy my reputation. My co-workers rallied around me after learning the truth. One of them even said, "You handled all of that with more grace than I ever could have." I didn't feel graceful. I felt lucky to have survived it with my sanity intact. A few months after the final court hearing, Tessa came to visit. It was awkward at first. We both carried the ghosts of who we used to be. But she stepped into the house, looked around, and said quietly, "It feels safe here." I smiled, because that was exactly what I'd worked so hard to create, a sanctuary. Not just for me, but for anyone I cared about. We spent that afternoon in the garden, talking about Mom and Dad, about the years we'd lost to pride and pain. For the first time, I didn't flinch when she brought up past. It didn't hurt the same way anymore. I'd learned that sometimes, peace isn't about forgetting, it's about no longer letting the past hold power over you. That evening, Liam joined us for dinner. The air was soft, filled with laughter that sounded foreign at first but quickly felt right. Tessa stayed late, and before she left, she hugged me tight. "You deserve this," she whispered. "All of it." After she left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the gentle hum of crickets outside. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I wasn't bracing for the next text, the next lie, the next scream. I just existed, and it was enough. Every now and then, people ask if I regret any of it. Changing the locks, calling the police, taking it to court. The truth is, I don't. I used to feel guilty for drawing boundaries, for choosing myself over someone else's chaos. But I've learned that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. Sometimes, when I walk past the mirror, I barely recognize myself. Not because I've changed on the outside, but because I carry myself differently now. Straighter, stronger, quieter, but in a way that feels powerful. There are still reminders, of course. The faint crack on the kitchen window that I never got around to fixing. The photo of Liam and me from the housewarming party that Fiona once defaced online. I printed a new copy, framed it, and placed it on the mantel. It's a small act of reclamation, but it matters. Every so often, I'll catch the faint scent of strawberries like that cheap candle she once gave me, and it takes me back. Not to the fear, but to the moment I decided I was done living under it. That scent used to make me anxious. Now, it reminds me that I survived her. Beatrice never reached out again. Last I heard, she moved to another state to be closer to one of her cousins. Liam doesn't talk about it much, and I don't press. Some relationships, I've realized, are meant to fade quietly into the background. A few months ago, we changed the locks again. Not out of fear this time, but as a ritual. A fresh start. I remember standing there, watching Liam screw in the final plate, and feeling a strange wave of emotion. It wasn't dread or tension. It was gratitude. Gratitude that the same sound that once symbolized fear metal turning, a bolt sliding into place, now meant something entirely different. Security, control, peace. We've learned to celebrate small things. The way the morning light hits the kitchen counter. The quiet evenings where the only sound is the ticking clock. The laughter that doesn't carry any edge of tension. Sometimes, I think about Fiona not with anger, but with a kind of detached sadness. I don't wish her harm. I just wish she'd found the peace she was so desperate to steal from me. But her story isn't mine to fix anymore. Mine is about what came after the rebuilding, the reclaiming, the rediscovering of who I am without fear tethered to my name. I walk to the front door every night before bed, checking the lock the way I always do. The habit is still there, but the emotion behind it has changed. I no longer turn the bolt because I'm scared of who might come in. I do it because this house, this life, is worth protecting. And when I hear the soft click echo through the hallway, I smile. Because now, when someone pounds on my door, I no longer open it out of fear, I open it out of power.